Welcome back to the Critical Moves podcast. This is episode 60, and it is the future of Total War Part 2. I'm joined by the delightful, the lovely, the wonderful Mr. Timothy. How are you, man?
Oh, you're lovely. Thank you very much. I'm very good and excited. How can I not be excited?
I know, it's there's lots of really cool stuff going on. Joe sent his apologies. Joe was going to join us. He was here when we did the future of Total War, episode 49. So we're going back, 5 weeks, 6 weeks or whatever, where we looked at what we thought might come out of the Creative Assembly announcement in December. Joe has broken a rib, or two, or three, I don't know. So he's unable to make it, and I think he's a bit upset because he really wanted to be here. But the show goes on. You know, we can't hold back waiting for sick old Joe to catch up. We've got to move on with this. We did, or we were, Tim, if you remember, we were planning on doing this last week, but Creative Assembly kind of pulled a Shan move, and they announced Medieval 3 2 weeks ago, and then last week they announced Total War Warhammer 40K.
I think all three of us were spot on this one, right? We saw this coming, but that doesn't take away from the excitement. And better this than something else, probably.
It isn't a surprise, but it's really nice to have this finally confirmed. It's been around the rumor mills, and apparently Creative Assembly have been working on it for a number of years now. So they've done great work in keeping it under wraps. But it's kind of been hinted at, and there's been a lot of anticipation that we're going to get 40K, Total War 40K, which is what I've been most looking forward to. But before we dive into the grim, dark future, let's look, first of all, at Medieval 3. This was the game that they announced as part of their anniversary showcase at the beginning of December. We all called it. I think I said in episode 49 that I would rather have had Empire 2, because Empire is probably my favorite of the Total War games, and I just loved the naval combat in that. But I was really happy with Medieval 3. Were you? I think that's one you wanted, and it's one that you anticipate as well. It's one that you predicted as well.
Yeah, I would say medieval warfare is such a huge. It certainly used to be a hugely popular strategy game period, and it's definitely what brought me into strategy games, assaulting castles, huge armies of knights and archers, and so on. And I think Medieval 2 was such a cool way to represent that in a lot of ways that other games couldn't on that scale. And I'm hoping for even bigger scale and even better establishment of the historical genre with Medieval 3.
There's going to be scale, but I mean, I covered this in a critical news episode, which I did on the 8th of December, so a couple of weeks ago. They've talked about how there is much more to the medieval world than just battles, which is kind of a bit of an oxymoron when you talk about Total War and there's more to it than battles. But a lot of what they were saying and a lot of what they were talking about when they revealed Medieval 3, it reminded me of Crusader Kings.
Hmm.
You know, there's other ways to influence the world. It's not just about painting the map. I think they seem to be taking a leaf out of Paradox's book with what they're working on for Medieval 3. Is that a good move? Do you think that's going to work? Moving away from this traditional go out and conquer aspect for Total War?
Well, I mean, we've already played the other Total War games, right? Medieval 2. While it has gotten a really old game, I personally would love more than just an update, like a remake. And I definitely think there's room for it. Now, Total War's target audience does prefer a little bit more of a simplified game than the Paradox Interactive audience. And so probably they don't want to steer away into too much complexity for their own benefit, even though I personally prefer the complexity. But I would also be careful not to rely too much on some old systems that they tried where you have spies or you have diplomats or something like that, which I think was okay to try it, but I don't think it works so well. It's very micromanagement heavy. It's not that fun. So I'm hoping if they do something that it's quite simple and a fun gameplay loop that you feel invested in and you want to do more. And also, I really don't want heroes. I don't want like the big hero that can take on 100 enemy and levels up and stuff like that. I really don't want that.
Save that for Warhammer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if I think back, and I mean, we're almost into Critical Move 2026, and I think we started this in 2024, which is just insane. It kind of makes me delirious with like, oh my god, we've been doing this for such a long time now. It feels like, and remember one of our first dozen episodes, we talked about Total War back then. It might be one of our first episodes was a Total War episode. So it's kind of a franchise which has taken up a large amount of our airtime on Critical Moves, and we talked about the historical authenticity, and we appreciate it's not entirely realistic, but it tries to be authentic in terms of the geography. Cities are where they are. They're not making things up. This is actually Rome is where Rome was, and where Rome continues to be. So it's very based in the real world, um, and I think that a lot of the comments that people have made and that we talked about was that we've learned history from playing these games. You've learned about how the different factions interacted and all this kind of stuff, and what they've said about this one said that they want to be true. They want to be true to history of the medieval time. So they gave an example of recruitment. So as we know, it's kind of a very abstract way that recruitment works in the older Total War games. You build your barracks, you train your men, and hey presto, there's a unit for you. A unit of archers or a unit of spearmen or whatever it might be. What they're suggesting, or what they're looking to implement for Medieval 3, is like a fealty. So call your banners, which just reminds me of Game of Thrones. You call your banners, and then your nobles, your dukes, and whoever they may be, or your lords attend with their armies, and that's how you put together your army. Not just by click a button, recruit your archers, click a button, recruit your archers, but you call your banners, and then people will answer the call, and they bring their armies and join your larger force. So I think that they are looking to make some changes as to what we have experienced in the past.
I guess if we look at something like Crusader Kings, they display that very well. This inner struggle between different levels of lordships and how you can have inner strife or kings trying to gather control and so on. And obviously the older Total War games don't have anything remotely like that. That the most you have is like if a city is too upset, it will go to rebels. But that does add some complexity, and I'd be curious how to do it. I would want to see them to succeed well with their target audience to do it very simple mechanics that you can learn quite quickly and not too many buttons and screens.
Yeah, because Total War is very much an action. I know
Yeah,
people say it's a strategy game, but it's very much an action strategy game,
it is.
and the battles are probably the reason why they're the only real time part of the game, much to your disgust, because I know that you've said you'd love to see a real time campaign in a Total War game.
It's not
On,
going to happen.
on a number of occasions, it's not going to happen. It would break them all. It would move them too far away from what their core mechanics are. So the battles have always been the kind of like the core mechanic for what this game is. It is an action title dressed up as a strategy game, and you're right. They have a core audience, but I think this. Actually, I think it's probably fair to say they have core audiences. I think that there's two separate audiences. I think that your fantasy audience, which is your Warhammer and now your Warhammer 40K, and then your historical audience. I think you'd agree. Creative Assembly have been through the mill recently with the challenges. I've been polite. The challenges they faced with Warhammer 3, with the AI. They broke things and then took ages to fix them and ignored the community when they said, "Hey, this is broken." And it took them a long time, and it took review bombing of Warhammer 3, and it took like Legend of Total War. He's a huge community YouTuber quitting. He's no longer going to play Total War games on his channel. It took a bit of a revolt for them to fix it. But these two audiences, they do expect things to be in a certain way, and I think you're right. Is there a risk that they're going to do too much and alienate their audience?
Yeah, I just personally don't think they should add too many buttons and too many extra pop-up screens where it kind of slows the game down too much and gives too much micromanagement. And yeah, I think the single biggest thing they need to look at on the campaign map is fun gameplay loops, things that makes you feel engaged, things that make you want to look at the map, things that you can add some strategy to it. It's not just like recruit units, build up army, send army to town, because we've played that game so many times, right? Like we've done that. We've been there. We don't need to do the exact same thing again. We want something new, something exciting, and something simple and actionable without like a whole book to learn how to play the game.
Yeah, so I guess the risk is that it becomes medieval to definitive edition
Yeah.
by just updating the graphics and updating the units, and then on the opposite side of things, the risk is that it becomes Crusader Kings Total War, and becomes too complex. So they've kind of got to find that middle ground.
Yeah, or they try to go with everything they've learned with Warhammer, and they install hero units, and they install like leveling up your hero to gain new abilities and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't think that would be great either.
Well, it's a long way off, and
Yeah.
I think you're right, and I don't think that that's going to. I can't see them putting hero units into a historical title. They never have before.
No.
They have fantasy for that, and they have the Saga series. I mean, the Saga series has had some kind of like mythological elements added to it with Troy. So I think that they have their vehicle for doing that. So I don't think that we're going to see hero units in a medieval game. I think it would break. It would break the immersion. It would break the systems far too much for them to do that. But it's a long way off. I mean, I think that from what I've read, and I've been doing some research on Medieval 3, we're looking at 2027, if not later. When they announced this, they said we've never announced a game
Yeah.
so early in its development cycle.
So probably even later.
Sorry,
So probably even later than
quite possibly,
2027.
yeah, 27, and maybe even 2028. If I'm still alive. So they've never announced a game so early, and they promised quarterly updates. So every quarter they're going to give us an update on where they are with the game and what they've worked on and what to expect, and hopefully some challenges, and hopefully we get to see some real authenticity from the development team. And I think that they've got their work cut out for them in terms of regaining the trust of the community. They diminished a lot of the trust that people have in their ability to make great games with the absolute clusterfuck which has been recent Warhammer 3 updates. Can they do it?
Yeah, I mean, of course they can. Of course they can. It's in their hands, and like you said, it's such a far way off. That means they have so much room still to go into so many different directions. There's so many things they could do, or I mean, obviously, I'm not there in their office, but something that's really important for them is iterative design, testing some things out, trying out, and very quickly seeing if it works out or not. Finding something that's really fun, something that is true to the Total War series, but still gives you a reason to buy a new game that's not a rehash of an old game.
It's quite a nice little segue into the next thing that we want to talk about, which is Warcore. We said this in episode 49. We talked about the existing engine, and we said that is it powerful enough? I think they've used the same engine since 2009, which I think was when Rome 2 came out, and it was awful on release. We raised concerns when we did episode 49, the future of Total War. We raised concerns about whether the engine was capable of supporting the next generation of Warhammer games. Sorry, I'm going to get Warhammer and Total War and Medieval and Warhammer 3 mixed up all throughout this. So just please, you'll know what I'm talking about by the context. Because you're going to have to be, because I'm going to forget and stop correcting myself. But they're building, or they have built this new engine, which is called Warcore, and we've all said throughout the history of Critical Moves, when we've discussed Total War, we've all said the engine is in need of an update. That's what they're giving us. They're giving us a new engine. I mean, it's about time, isn't it?
Yeah, I hope especially the campaign map is gonna have a lot of really cool new features as well. I think the Rome 2 update was actually really cool for some very important changes. Like, for example, armies had an area of control that you can pass anymore, and armies had different stances. And I think those features that came out with Rome 2 were so important to improve, making it feel like you can move your armies around, and like I thought this was such a nice change, and I'm hoping for a similar bump into the campaign map for cool features in the campaign map that just make logical sense, that make playing it more fun in a similar way.
Of course, there are risks with the new engine, and I think this is what we saw with Rome 2. That was released on the new engine at the time, and the game was released in almost an unplayable state. So there are risks around that. Does Creative Assembly have the support to be able to release something which is broken again?
I'm personally patient, but that also means that I'm not gonna buy it on release, and I'm gonna see if it works well, and if it doesn't work well, I'm gonna wait until it does. At that point, you might as well call it an early access game to be fair to the people paying money early on for it. But I think an investment long term is good for the series.
I think it was necessary. I mean, it's the
Mhm.
first new engine in what 16,
A long time. Yeah.
16 years, 17 years. So they've been running on almost 2-decade-old technology with these games. So it's been necessary. But one of the things that they brought out about Warcore was destructible environments, and they hailed it. And I thought it was quite funny because they were like, "We've got this amazing thing where you can blow things up," and I was like, "But I did that in Rome." I've knocked down the castle walls and built ways into cities and all this kind of stuff. But what they're talking about is you can actually bombard and smash buildings and create rubble and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, but I could do that in Rome as well. I could fire my flaming catapults and set buildings on fire and destroy them. And then at the end of the battle, if I'd destroyed the Temple of Mars in Rome, then the Temple of
Yeah.
Mars was destroyed on the campaign map. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I always think if you've got something new, then shout about it and tell us it's great. But don't dress up old features as new features and
No, probably the biggest thing is gonna be more units that look prettier, that run smoother once all the bugs are sorted out, obviously.
I think more units is a good idea because I mean, Total War's always been about scale and
Right.
it's always been about, well, you've always wanted it to be about massive battles with, you know, it's often thousands, but I think you'd love to see tens of thousands and
Yeah.
these uh, epic battles to control the fate of the world. I think those are the things that we want to see, and I think that seems to be the way that they're pushing it. So, hopefully there'll be changes to the campaign map. And one of the things they talked about with Medieval 3 was having like trade caravans that you could attack and having structures and things outside of your city that you could attack. So maybe we could see some more interesting. I think it'd be really good to see some different kind of battle types because
Yeah.
to my mind, you either have a siege battle or you have a stand up fight. And maybe Warcore is going to give us some opportunities to do different kind of battles, maybe with like capture points and objectives that you must achieve, or things of that nature.
Yeah, I guess that is one aspect that has been missing is the logistics, and not a lot of these kind of games include logistics. Whereas logistics is actually a huge part of warfare throughout all of history. An army marches on its stomach,
Hmm.
and yeah, I can imagine logistics being a relatively simple mechanic, simple in the terms of not a lot of buttons and not a lot of moving parts, but quite complex in terms of tactical and strategic potential in the game. So yeah, no, I mean, I would personally, now that you mention it, think that logistics is a great thing to add.
It'd be a great way to pick apart your enemy, and I
Yeah.
think that rather than just you have this climactic battle between their defenders and your attackers, and that's the end of it. Where you could actually, as we say, attack a trade caravan and you cut off their money. I think when I think back to other titles, I think the only kind of mechanic you had like that was if you left an army standing in someone's territory for too long. It caused damage to the surrounding area, which was quite limited, really, in what it could do. So to be able to pinpoint strike at certain aspects of that empire. So attack their trade or attack their farming or disrupt their supply lines, their food, their agriculture, whatever. That could be an interesting way of making some changes.
Now, are they going to go the same way with DLC as to like add factions or time zone timelines with DLC, like a Crusader DLC or stuff like this?
I think if the Crusades weren't included in the base game, there would be uproar. I think that's I mean, if the Crusades were in the first Total War
It was an
medieval.
expansion, wasn't it?
No, 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 no. Not in the first one. Not in the second one either. I
And the
think
second one. And the second one, it was an expansion with the Aztecs as well. You could play as the Aztecs. It had four mini campaigns: Americas, Britannia, Crusades, and Teutonic.
they had Crusades in the base game.
Okay.
I'm sure
Okay.
they
But
did. I
okay.
mean, it's been a long time, but I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. You could. The Pope would call for a crusade, and you could go and capture the Holy Land. And I'm sure that was. Um, so, I think that's one of the aspects of medieval warfare, which I think is vital to the period that they're looking at. You're going to have crusades, otherwise, that's one of the
Yeah, but
reasons why there
you
was
could sell
war.
it as a DLC, right? You can sell it as a DLC, right?
You could, and I guess what we're asking is, do Creative Assembly are they going to be predatory? There's
I
another way of
mean,
putting it
I
in
mean,
the DLC strategy.
we have seen a difference between the historical ones versus the fantasy ones, right? And to talk already a little bit about Warhammer 40K, the factions on release indicate exactly that, right?
Well, now that you mention it, let's look at the elephant in the room, which is Total War Warhammer 40K, which I think that it's certainly been one of my most highly anticipated games. There's all of the rumors and everything. I've been very excited about this, and I think you have too. Yeah. Having seen the announcement, having read about what they're doing, are you still as excited?
I am. I absolutely love sci-fi in general. I think 40K, I find it a lot more interesting than Warhammer. And yeah, I mean, my thought is, are we going to have space battles before we're going to have naval battles?
Well, this is something which we talked about in episode 49, and I think I said I want to see these enormous cathedral-style battleships blasting each other in space. Okay, um, this game is going to be released in 2026. Total War Warhammer 40K will be released in 2026, but it's going to be released next year. The development team have already been rolled out to do interviews and roundtables and all this kind of stuff, and they have talked about fleets. So we know there are fleets, and we know that there are going to be fleets in this game. And Simon Mann, who's one of the producers, he did say, I'll find the exact quote because it was quite an important one. He says, "You've got these big fleets kind of moving between them, the planets, ferrying troops, engaging in battles against one another." So he's talked about naval combat, or has he? Are we talking about player controlled naval engagements, or are we talking about auto resolve stats comparisons?
So I would say I get why not making naval warfare in medieval or Rome. I think most players playing the historical games would rather avoid naval warfare and would auto resolve it most of the time. I think in 40K it gets really, really interesting. Like, that sounds really cool. And I can even imagine the space warfare being at least as interesting as the ground warfare, even though probably the ground warfare has still more focus than the space warfare. And a lot of games where you have both. Okay, here's the thing: players usually prefer one of the two, either on the ground or the naval warfare, and will play mostly one and then auto resolve the other. This is also true in Star Wars games like this and so on. And yeah, I think that this gives the space battles give a lot of credence to tipping the favors towards the space warfare, because that's just such a cool thing to do. I think space warfare is just so fucking cool. Yeah.
10 years ago in Battlefield Gothic Armada, we had Warhammer 40K naval combat. So it was doable a decade ago in real time space battles, yeah, with battleships and teleports and torpedoes and nova cannon and lightning strikes on the enemies, and it's possible. There's been entire games made out just of this naval combat, and I almost feel like it's one of those situations where the silence is deafening because they've had all these opportunities since the announcement. And I appreciate the announcement was only last week. It was Thursday last week at the Game Awards. But they've had a week, and they've mentioned naval. They've mentioned navies, and they've mentioned naval battles, but they haven't explicitly said player controlled ship to ship combat. And I think that when you look at the scale of 40K, yeah, the ground battles are exciting and they're dynamic and there's action, and that's what a lot of people want to see. And this is why we're getting Dawn of War 4, because people want to see this kind of Space Marines killing orcs and orcs killing Eldar and Eldar
Mhm,
killing
mhm.
the Imperial Guard. People want to see that kind of stuff. That's the bread and butter of the setting. I feel that if this was a feature that they had planned at release, because there's a caveat, at release, if they
Yeah.
had this planned as a feature, they would have said so by now. because they've had all the opportunity in the world, and we've seen
Mm.
screenshots of ships. They've talked about fleet battles, but they haven't come out and said you will be able to control your ships to fight another player's ships. And I think that to me is enough of an indication that we're not going to see it to make it almost gospel that we're not going to see it. And I have been known to be wrong from time to time, but on this point, I think I'm right, and I don't think we're going to see naval player-controlled naval warfare in space in Total War Warhammer 40K, and I think it's an absolute travesty if they don't do it.
I mean, they don't have a reason not to announce it right off the bat to excite people, right? So if they didn't, then they probably didn't, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's especially odd considering the setting of like having all these different planets, because that plays a bit differently than Fantasy Warhammer, where it's one big planet, and sure, there's some oceans, but most of the time you're just crossing lands, and then now here and again there's an ocean, and here it's just one planet and then another planet, and everything is just separate planets. And how to go from one to the next? You just, I guess, teleport over. I don't know.
Well, if you're the Eldar or the Eldari, you use your
Hmm.
webway to move between them, I guess. But no, you're right, and it's one of the things that we've talked about in the past is that is there a way to have Total War Warhammer 40K be just on one planet? And I think that was probably something that they may have considered at one point, because then you remove the need for space. You just have all these factions arrive on the same planet in like Dark Crusade from Dawn of War, or like Gladius, or any other 4X game set in the Warhammer 40K universe, where you can have all these different factions arrive on the same planet and engage in warfare. But they're not doing that. You know, the way they've actually described it. And I know that one of the things that you said in previous episodes was you want to be able to see that you're in space, and then you go down to the planet, and it's quite seamless how you move. But the way that it's almost like there's 4 layers to this. So you have your battlefields, then you have your planets, and then you have your crusade theaters, which is they use the terminology flashpoints. So this is the solar system that you're fighting on, and then however you perform in that particular flashpoint crusade theater will then inform the top layer, which is the galactic map. So they're saying this is galactic scale. I need ships to move my armies around. If my Emperor class battleship is just being used as a transport to move my ground forces from one planet to the other, I'm going to be really, really disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited for this game. I was, you know, and when they did the Warhammer 3 announcement, and they said we're going to announce Warhammer 40, we're going to show the trailer for Warhammer 40K at the Game Awards. I can't wait, and I actually stayed up until 4:00 in the morning to watch this trailer. And then I was like overwhelmed. That was fantastic. And I was so excited, and like the customization and everything that they've thought of. And then I was like, 4 factions, is that it? All right, okay. And then I was like, where's my ship-to-ship combat?
Yeah, I mean, with Fantasy, they released 3 games now, one after the other, with tons of DLC in every single one of those games. It could be a very long-term vision that they have. Like, what if they release naval combat in the second version? I don't know.
Or what if they release Naval Combat as a DLC?
Hmm.
You know, because that is one DLC that I would pay for. Because I think it just, but I just can't get my head around the fact why you wouldn't include it to begin with. You know, because it's so vital to the system.
Well, to release earlier.
No, it's so vital to the setting to have naval combat. I think.
Oh no, no, I agree, but maybe it was as a business decision to be like, okay, this naval warfare is going to cost us a lot more development time. We're still doing it, but we're gonna cut that out of the initial release so that we can release earlier and just have a stream of income earlier.
Maybe. I mean, they have been working on this for a few years, is what they said. So maybe they were kind of forced into, well, we're going to have to announce something because we're getting our asses kicked over the Warhammer 3 debacle, which was last month or a couple of months ago. Maybe they were kind of like forced. Okay, well, you're going to have to do something. Okay, well, let's give them Warhammer 40K, but it's not ready. Okay, well, what can we cut? Well, we can cut naval
Yeah,
combat.
yeah,
And
yeah.
But one of the things you mentioned there was DLCs, and I think that the Warhammer series, which there's been 3 of them, the DLC for those is astronomical. There's just so many, and
Mm,
Warhammer
yeah.
40K takes that to another level. You've got a galaxy, you've got a galactic amount of factions and faction variants and things that you can introduce into this game. What kind of things do you think that I mean, I guess we're hoping that we see all of the different factions. So we want to see Necrons. We will see Tyranids. You know, are we going to see them arrive? You know,
All of them.
all of them. You know, one at a time, spread over. You know, one every 6 months. This could be going on until 2030, 2040.
Custom factions.
You know? Well, so customization is actually something which they've put a lot of time into with this game. This you can customize. I think with the focus on Space Marines, you can design your own chapter. But one of the things that I was thinking about when I was preparing for this episode was how much importance is there going to be really on customizing my Marines armor when I'm zoomed out looking at 200 units fighting.
I think a lot of what we've all done when playing Total War games is like zoom in the battlefield. Like when we don't have anything to do in the moment and we have to wait a little bit, and we zoom in and we see like the individual like units like fighting, and that's always been really fun for me personally. But no, I mean, I do give these companies so much flack for having so many DLCs and the total price being so expensive. Now, I do want to say that these are the type of games that people can invest a lot of hours in, and like a lot of hours. And then they do keep maintaining it for a really long time, releasing new things for it. So while I kind of find it crazy how much the total price can end up to, it does come with notable, benefits, playtime and maintenance duration.
Yeah, I think that we're spoiled as gamers, and I think that we often recoil at the price of the AAA games. I mean, if this isn't £70 or €80 at launch, I would be surprised. I think that's
Yeah.
the kind of level that you'll be paying. But I always use the comparison to a movie ticket, with I might pay £10 to go for 2 hours of entertainment, watch the movie, whereas I'm pay £70 for 100 hours of entertainment. So you're getting a lot more bang for your buck with these games. So I don't fall out with these things being chargeable and being expensive. I just do wonder whether they're going to abuse the DLC process
Yeah.
by and that's the risk that they say, okay, so
Yeah.
one of the things which has been missing at launch was Chaos Space Marines, and a lot of questions asked about why Chaos not involved right from the start. That they are other than the
Easy
orcs
to
was
make.
included. Yeah, well, they're very easy to make, aren't they? Just reskin the Marines, but they are the quintessential
Mhm.
anti-Imperium faction. Will they release Chaos Space Marines, or will they release Demons of Khorne with the World Eaters and the Demons of Nurgle with the Death Guard, and will they factionalize these DLCs and release them? So you can actually release four different Chaos Space Marine DLCs to cover all of the Chaos Space Marines, and charge £15 for each, and therefore you're paying for the base game again. You're paying 60 quid to be able to access the entirety of the Chaos Space Marines, and then you've got the Black Legion, and you've got all these different legions. Are we going to see that kind of practice where? And I appreciate it's speculation; we just don't know. But when you look at some of the lackluster DLCs for Warhammer, where I think they released like a couple of Legendary Lords as a DLC, and it's like, well, is that it? Are we going to see the same sort of practice?
Yeah, to me, it's a choice for them to make. Do they want cash now, or do they want to build a long-term legacy? You know, and that's really a decision for them to make.
A long-term legacy, but also a long-term relationship as well, because this is
Yeah.
going to capture an entirely new audience.
Mhm.
You've got your established Total War audience. This is also going to capture the 40K audience as well. Which brings me to another interesting point, which is that Dawn of War 4 is releasing next year. Total War Warhammer 40K is releasing next year. There's already been a lot of comments on forums and discords and Reddits about the similarities in the art style, which of course is they operate within the same aesthetic space. So of course there's going to be some similarities, but there's a lot of people saying, well, why would I play a Total War battle of Space Marine versus Orcs when I can play a Dawn of War 4 battle of Space Marines versus Orcs? Are they going to struggle by going up against Dawn of War 4?
I think they could hype each other up as well. Like people who don't know much about Warhammer 40K, who live a bit outside or on the edge of this, could see more and more 40K things happening and be more and more intrigued. You could also drive up the tabletop gaming sales. So I mean, I think from a Warhammer 40K point of view, it's a win-win.
The way I look at it is that the market is already quite crowded. I mean, Space Marine 2 came out and really popularized 40K to video gamers. Of course, it's a third person action game, but and I love it. It's brilliant. But it's fantastic. But that kind of like introduced 40K to a lot of people who never would have played it before, because it's very visceral in the way it plays, and you feel. I mean, I remember playing it, and I was like, when I first played Space Marine 2, and I was like, this must be what it's like to be a Space Marine. It was just it just felt fucking awesome to like go in and hack all these things together, all these things apart. So you've already had Space Marine 2 introduce 40K to a wider audience. You then got Battle Sector, which has been around for years. Very, very popular, very successful, and great game. One of my favorite 40K games. Dark Tide exists. Battlefleet Gothic exists. There's already so many 40K games, and I guess that Total War needs to do something different. And I think that the thing that they need to do different is the scale.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
this brings us back to our first point around the lack of fleets, the lack of fleet battles. They need to capture that scale, and I think by removing that vital element to the galactic scale, they're actually not going to do that. It's just going to be a case of, this is my land battle, which is like Dawn of War 4, and then I go and fight another land battle with very, very little this meta layer, this fleet layer, very, very little involvement with that. It's quite an abstract way of managing the game and moving between battlefields and things,
It has to be good. If they do naval warfare, it has to be really good, or else it just becomes auto resolve every time anyway, and then they've invested all of that into not much. So I think that it needs to be really fun and makes people want to play it. Because let's say you want to invade some other planet a neighboring planet. Okay, you got to gather up your army, you got to gather up your fleet, send over the fleet, and you're maybe already eager to land your armies, but oh no, I have to first fight this naval fleet. I think that's super cool, but it needs to be fun. And if it's not fun, then it's frustrating rather than adding something to it.
Yeah, I hear that. I guess it becomes a bit of a barrier to having fun. Is, oh Christ, I've got to go through this whole
Yeah.
boring
Yeah.
naval aspect where I might get defeated and I can't even land my troops, and that
Yeah.
could be a barrier to getting people to actually engage with the gameplay and enjoy the gameplay loop, and therefore continue to play it and continue to buy the DLCs. So maybe it was a smart decision to not include it. Maybe I'm just being a salty old man here and saying I want to see it.
Not included, but then make it, really fun and cool and good. But that then requires again a huge investment and so on.
And I think this brings us to probably and I hate to be a bit. I feel like a bit of a naysayer. I feel like a bit of a doom monger, but because I'm really I was going to say stoked, and I hate the word. I'm not Australian, but I'm really excited for Total War Warhammer 40K. I genuinely am. I've been wanting to see it happen for such a long time, and now that it is, I'm like a kid in a candy store. It's fantastic, but this is going to be the first Total War game that is launched simultaneously on PC and console.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This causes me concerns.
Oh yeah, of
You
course.
know, I mean, when we look at, and we're going back a long time, we look at when Supreme Commander 2 was released, and Chris Taylor has said about Supreme Commander 2. He said when Square Enix bought they bought gas powered games, and they said they're going to publish Supreme Commander 2, and they said, but we want you to release it on Xbox as well. So it was really dumbed down from the original Subcom in order to get it into a state where it could be released on consoles. And I appreciate that consoles have moved on, and I appreciate you can play consoles with a mouse and keyboard now as well, and I appreciate you've got like the new Steam, the whatever it's called, the Gabe machine or whatever it's called, the new. So consoles have become much more mainstream and much more aligned with PCs, but there is a niggling fear that by making it accessible on consoles, they're going to remove some of the complexity that makes it Total War.
So to be honest, Crusader Kings also came out on console, and I actually tried it. I have it here on console, and I played around with it, and I mean, I wouldn't I wouldn't advise anyone to try and do that. You can, it's a possibility, but okay, they tried their best to make the controller as usable as possible. But so I'm okay with that, like, oh, you could play this game here because, it's technically possible, but they didn't change the game massively for that. And that's what I'm hoping here because, I mean, strategy and console has never really seen eye to eye too much, right?
No, they haven't. No, no. I guess maybe it's a case of rather than trying to take the Total War formula and cram it into a console space, instead they wrap the console space around the Total War formula. And I think
Yeah.
that's the tricky thing for them to do. That can't be easy, right? When you look at, as you say, they've never really seen eye to eye consoles and strategy games. They've never been particularly successful, have they? So I do wonder: is it possible? And I appreciate it. It's not simulation level, but Total War games have always been slightly more. They're much more complex than your typical RTS game where you just group of units and click go attack. There's more to it with that, with positioning and alignments and things like that. So I don't think it's a system which is built to work well on consoles. Yet they've confirmed that it's going to be released on consoles at the same time as it's on PC. I mean, am I right to feel a bit concerned about that?
I mean, come on, they have to know. They have to know that like 99% of their players is on PC, and this is like just a little extra, right? Like they're not actually gonna target console gamers, I don't think, right?
Well, I
Right?
assume they are.
Right? Right?
No, this is the thing. You know, I mean, maybe this was a stipulation from Games Workshop. Maybe, you know, if you want to have Total War Warhammer 40K, you're gonna have to do it for consoles as well. Maybe that was. You know, I don't know. You know, it just seems like a bit of a. It might work, right? I'm not going to buy a console to find out. I have a I have a lovely PC, and I'll play it on my PC. But it'd be interesting to see how it works. So anyway, we're fast approaching the end of our time together, Timothy, which is it's always a shame. It's always the low point of my existence when I have to say goodbye to you.
It is one last little bit of news as well that came out last week in relation to Total War is the final 1.0 release of Total War Attila mods, the Dawnless Days Lord of the Rings. It's a huge total conversion mods for Total War Attila, and plays out in the Lord of the Rings huge campaign map and everything like that. Like so many units, so many factions. Like if you like Lord of the Rings, if you like Total War, huge thing.
We'll put a link to that in the description, because I think we like to support modders and we like to support indie games much more than we like to support these enormous companies. So we'll make sure that tell me what's it called again?
Dawnless Days, Lord of the
Dawnless
Rings.
Days. Okay, I'll make sure that gets linked in here. Before we go, of all of the Warhammer 40K factions, which one would you like to see introduced as a DLC first?
Necrons, yeah.
Necrons.
I enjoyed playing those in Dawn of War, and now I want to play them.
You liked Dawn of War, didn't you?
Yeah.
Please
It was
introduce
fun.
that
It
one
was
to you.
fun.
Yeah. Actually, before we go as well, when you mentioned Necrons, it's quite interesting because as soon as you said it, I was thinking, well, I wonder how they would play differently, because they've said there's going to be with the 4 factions that they have to begin with. There's a lot of asymmetry in how they play, in terms of the Eldar can move between webways and the Space Marines. What you come with is all you get. You can't really reinforce. They're this elite force where each one's worth 100 of the enemy, and then the Imperial Guard, or Astra Militarum. I always keep using the original name because I'm old. It's very much like a traditional Total War faction with loads of infantry and artillery and things like that. But we're going to have to do another episode on this when we get more information on Warhammer 40K Total War. Hopefully by then, not that you've not been wonderful, but hopefully by then Joe will be back, because I think that Joe is going to be gutted that he's missed this. I know that he was very excited about this. So you want Necrons, I want Tyranids.
Yeah. While you were talking, I was thinking, okay, Necrons, I enjoyed them in Dawn of War, but the low amount of units, I think, make it not as interesting for a Total War game. And then you're absolutely right, the Tyranids, like the huge Zerg effects. I think that's exactly what would be so fun in a Total War game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It would, and I think they would play so entirely different. But that's all we've got time for. I always leave the audience wanting for more. So, will you come back and talk Warhammer 40K Total War with me again another time?
Yeah. But I want to see the game released well, and either do early access and say you're testing the game and you're covering all the bugs, or release it finished and good.
That's the challenge. So, Gauntlet's been thrown down, Creative Assembly. Tim says, release the game working, or don't pretend. That is all that we have time for here on the Critical Moves podcast. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you are as excited as we are, and I know I sounded a bit negative, and I do apologise, it's just my nature. If you're as excited about Total War Warhammer 40K as we are, then come to our Discord and talk to us about it. You just Google us, Critical Moves Podcast, and it'll take you to all of the ways to get in touch with us, to our website. There's a link to the Discord on there. If you go to criticalmovespodcast.com/Discord, you'll get a link to our Discord server. Come and join us. Come and tell us which faction you would like to see. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment with which faction you'd like to see as a DLC for Warhammer 40K Total War, first of all. Tim, as always, thank you very much. You're a gem. You're a diamond. I love you.
My pleasure. It's been good.
Thanks for listening. Take it easy. Goodbye.